Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review Plane from 2023. So, Plane is, in all honesty, a decent action movie. Uh, I would really have a problem having to feel like one way or the other about it. I wish I could clearly state it's like, man, this movie. But, like, at least the one thing that I could state is for it having an hour and 40-minute runtime, the movie goes by really quickly. And we are to also have like a 20-minute like kind of plane scene in the beginning of the film, and then we also have like a 10 to 20 minute plane scene by the end of the movie. So the whole movie isn't about like the plane, because really that wouldn't be rational to try to build an action movie that is 100% on a plane, even though people have done that in the past. So what happens for this movie? Well, come to find out, we have Gerard Butler's character, who is Brody, and I'm not gonna I'm gonna explain it a little, but then I'll get into spoilers a little bit more, and I'll kind of go through that. So we have Brody, who is to be this capitan of this plane on New Year's, and so Brody is to find out upon this plane that there is to be this prisoner that is to be transported, and that prisoner just so happens to be Lewis, Mike Coulter, who a lot of people probably know from the Disney Plus / Netflix series Luke Cage, as Luke Cage. So the guy that is to be holding the image here with Gerard Butler. So we eventually find that one reason or another that I'll get into a little bit more when we get into spoilers, this plane ends up crashing, having to do an emergency landing, and lands in a place that is to supposedly be unsafe, that is to have no real law or no real police or anything like that. So we eventually come to find that Brody and his plane of people are to, of course, go to a location where it seems people are to be nabbed so they can be ransomed for money, it seems. And so we go on to have the NTSB, or whatever the bureau is that goes on to investigate after a plane crashes. We have guys like Scarsdale and Hampton who are trying to go on and figure out where this plane is to land, and we get information of where they are to be located. So Scarsdale has this kind of unit that is led by Shellback, that they end up having to go out and try to find Brody's character and his people. And so the further and further we go on here, the more that Brody needs to go on and kind of give them information about where their other where they are at now, because at some point they're going to get forcibly taken, the passengers, and I'll get into that a little bit more when we get into spoilers. So with that said, where can you go on and see Plane if you want to go on and just kind of see it, even though it might not be the best clear version? I think I went on and just saw this on Yes Movies app, but more than likely, if any of the apps of which that I've recommended people over time, eventually that will come on to other apps too. You might just have to wait a little bit longer. But so, unless you want to go on and watch this in theaters because maybe you have nothing else out on theaters that you would like to see, me honestly, I would just love to be able to see Whale or The Whale. I'm like, when is that movie coming out? Like, man, I haven't been able to see. Like, is it just select theaters or what is it? I'm not quite sure. But so, anyways, because I've yet to see one bootleggish copy of the movie. Like, was the movie delayed? What is going on? I'm so confused. But so, anyways, let's go on and let's get into that double five. I'm not going to go into heavily spoilers as I normally would because it seems that people love a shorter film. But I'm just going to go like generically into just kind of quick, hopefully pacing this and kind of get it all out there. So we have Brody that, of course, is to be calling his daughter, and it seems that he, of course, is to be late for his own plane. And so Brody, of course, is talking to his daughter, and it seems that she is, of course, busy with school. And so we have Brody that is to go to his plane, and him and his co-pilot are to have some chit chat. I believe the character's name is Delay, uh, Dele. So if I'm pronouncing that wrong, then I'm sorry. Um, it seems like he's from Hong Kong, so I'm assuming that's probably uh, Delay. I don't know. I didn't quite catch the pronouncing of the name. So we have, of course, Brody who finds out that there is to be this officer who is to give Brody this information uh, about this prisoner that is going to be transported here. And so we, of course, have Brody who's like, well, like, do we really have to go on and have this person be transported on my plane? And we, of course, have the officer telling Brody, it's like, well, yeah. So it's like, all right. So we have Brody and the co-pilot going on and having this plane taking off. They were to be told that, of course, there is to be some severe weather problems, but we have the guy who is to kind of make the plan for the plane, and he is to say, it's like, well, hey, if you just go this route, it'll be a shortcut, and it'll save you a bunch of time on gas and everything like that. So they went with this guy's suggestion. So we go on to have like the weather happen, and so Brody is to kind of get some God, what is the right word? Some turbulence, and like the plane is starting to shake. Certain passengers are starting to get a little worried, but so we have Brody who, after the turbulence, is to go back to his passengers and going to tell them, like, hey, everything's okay, and so on and so forth. Just try to calm them down. And so we, of course, then go on and have Brody who needs to go all the way back to the front of the plane because they had gotten hit by lightning. So they all of a sudden have to emergency land the plane, and so they can't really see much because it's nighttime and they're trying to land this plane. So we have Brody that luckily can kind of just see a certain spot for them to, like, okay, I guess this is land, so we're just gonna go here, because they don't have any hydraulics, they don't have any much of any they're flying blind. So luckily they go on and be able to land this plane, and they have to kind of manual everything because a lot of stuff just doesn't work. They can't just hit a button and have things just kind of work. It doesn't work that way. So they land the plane, and we find that eventually certain people had died while the plane was in motion. We come to find out that a stewardess and also the detective had gone on to die, or whoever he is, the guy that probably does normally is the plane officer. I don't know what those are usually called. But anyways, pushing on. So we have, of course, Brody telling everybody that they really should get off the plane because, of course, at some point, staying on the plane would not be a good idea because at some point the plane will really heat up, and it just wouldn't be healthy for anybody. It would be like possibly anybody kind of baking in an oven and just wouldn't be safe. So we have them go and like unpack everything, kind of bring it out. And so we then have the co-pilot, who I guess is to be very familiar with this location. And so he is to go on and tell Brody that it's like, well, hey, this place isn't safe. This place doesn't have a police. Like, we're effed. So we then have Hampton on the other end of things that is investigating this. And so the guy who is to go on and tell these people where to go, we have Scarsdale, who's like, well, hey, you better give me every single like flight plan and everything that you had put together, and I hope that your little shortcut is gonna cost you every penny now that you've made this mistake. So we go on and have Brody, who is to tell everybody that he's going to leave the group, and he is going to go on to find this one facility that is to have possibly had maybe a phone there or some way to connect to the outside world, hoping that would be his best case. So we have Brody, who is to state that he is going to go on and leave with Lewis, who of course is the prisoner. So they're like, really? Like, out of all the people that you can take with you, you're taking that guy? And Brody's like, well, yeah, I'm going to take that guy. So come to find out, while the both of them are making their way to this kind of facility, we have Scarsdale and we have Hampton, who are needing to go on and just kind of find out intel on the Capitan, on Brody, on Gerard Butler's character. So they end up having video of Brody's character needing to go on and choke out one of his own passengers as he was going on during one of these flights and having a fight with somebody. And so when Brody was to try to intervene, the guy started to almost kind of pick a fight with the captain, so the captain had to choke him out. And we, of course, have Hampton that's like, oh my god, this is like the worst pilot that we could have picked. And Scarsdale is like, I'm liking this guy. Because come to find out, this guy has military experience, so it seems that this guy is going to be the best kind of guy for the job, because if worse comes to worse, he's going to choke somebody out. So we had gone on to have Brody, who had went back into the plane to find equipment that, of course, that officer had, and kind of look through his things and find the knife that Lewis had as evidence, as well as also kind of taking the gun from this guy. So Brody is walking off with Lewis, and so Lewis is to ask Brody, it's like, well, hey, like, do you still have that gun that that he had? Did you take that knife? And so Brody doesn't answer, and then when Brody is to turn, Lewis is all of a sudden gone. So Brody gets to this facility and is to find camcorders with obvious evidence of ransom notes and stuff like that to try to get money and squeeze money out of governments or whichever. So we have Brody that goes on to try to find this this kind of unusual kind of phone system where it seems that Brody has to kind of tie these wires and try to connect these things. It's kind of like a telephone operator when you would call like 411 for information to hope that they can kind of connect you to that. Like that's what it seems that Brody is trying to do here, to try to like connect wires and then call this number. So Brody goes on to try to call the like the airport or the airlines or anybody that can go on and like help him to hopefully get him to the right people. And so this woman is to go on and tell him, it's like, well, I'm sorry, sir, we've been hearing a lot of prank calls from this. And he's like, no, 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 like, I'm the real guy. Like, I'm the guy tied to this plane. Please help us. And so they're like, well, what's your badge number? And he's like, crap, I left that on the plane. I didn't think I need that here. So we have Brody who is to kind of give up on that. And so he kind of connects wires again and shifts some things around. And so instead he just calls his daughter and is to, of course, give her information about where he is within the world, because he realizes that this is kind of like the Castaway situation where like the search area is like twice the size of Texas or something like that. It's like an absurd degree of which that they probably won't be able to easily figure out where exactly they are. So Brody calls his daughter and is to tell her almost the exact location. And so by that time, we end up having one of these kind of pirate guys come in and try to take out Brody, which then leads to Brody fighting off this guy and then Lewis shooting him, having both Lewis and Brody just kind of like, hey man, here's a gun, here's some water. Because it seemed that Lewis was to go on and kill a number of people and then kind of armor up. So because really we just have Lewis is like, well, like, it seems that, like, why not help you guys out? Because he's, like, gonna go to prison anyways. So they find the camcorder and they find this ransom thing and they're like, okay, like, that tells us, like, who these people kind of are. So speaking of which, we have the pirates. And so we have one guy who is to come to the leader and is to, of course, have intel about this plane. And so they, of course, are to be like, okay, like, well, let's track down where this plane site is, and then we'll, of course, like, take all these people and hold them for ransom as they're seemingly known to do. So they go on to find where these people are, hold them for ransom, and so we then have the Scarsdale and the Hampton guys who are to be these investigators, and so they are to get the intel from Brody's daughter. And so they're like, okay, like, let's send out a team to get to this one location. So it seems that the team could get there, but it seems that there wasn't, like, an easy, like, retrieval system to get everybody, like, on some plane or something there. So yeah, like, it seemed that once they were to be dropped off, they were given, like, 24 hours to be retrieved, and it's like, well, that just seems dumb because these people need way less than 24 hours to get out of here. So we have, by the time that both Brody and Lewis make their way back to the other passengers, the passengers are to be met by these pirates. and they are of course to be asked like who is the captain and who of course is to be who as far as the passenger list. So they take all these people, and so both Bodhi and Lewis are to kind of hide in the shadows, realizing that if they kind of give themselves up, like then these people would have no chance. So, and certain passengers had gotten killed. So we have, by the time that both Brody and Lewis start taking or making their way to get to where exactly these people are being held, we had Brody also leave a note for the people of where they're heading, and so we have Shellback who finds the plane and is to find the note, and he's like, "Aha!" So we have Brody and Lewis who's just kind of killing all these guys, and so they find out where the passengers are, and it's like, okay, everybody just kind of get on this bus. And so we of course have Brody and Lewis is like, well, what the heck are we gonna do? Like, it seems that there is gonna be like way too many guys, like we're gonna be way outnumbered and we're outgunned and whatever. So Brody's like, well, I'll just give myself up, and that of course will kind of give you guys time as a distraction. So by the time that Brody is to go on and give himself up and talk to the leader, we then all of a sudden have Shellback and his team come in and start clapping everybody and killing everybody. And so we then have Brody and Shellback's team kind of scramble to get back to this bus for them to get the heck out of there. So they go all the way back to the plane because it seems to be that's their only plan, is that now Brody has to figure out a way to get this plane back off the ground and get to a safe zone for them to land. And so we have Brody that is to go on and try to get the plane kind of rolling again. And so we have Shellback's team who is trying to hold off the pirates and try to take them down. So we have Lewis who is to stay back, and he's like, well, you know, Brody, I'm not going to go on this plane with you. Like, I'm just going to stay here in this place and just kind of and just hope for the best. But Lewis is to, surprisingly enough, find like a big stack of money, and he's like, all right, like, I'm going to be living it up now wherever I'm at. So we go and have them take out a pretty decent amount of this team, even to the point of they're having at some point some almost like bazookas being fired at this plane. And so Brody is kind of telling them, it's like, well, hey, like, don't let them hit the fuel line or we're effed. So the plane luckily takes off, and so luckily they're to be able to land like kind of just by fumes, it almost seems, because we had like one engine who kind of goes down, but they had to kind of really use both engines to kind of get as much lift as they could to get as high as they can in the air. And so we really had Brody that is to go on and tell like the guys like Scarsdale through a walkie-talkie, because they legitimately had no real way of actually telling these guys through their systems, because nothing is really working. It's like, well, hey, find me a safe place to land. And so luckily they gave them a actual location, and so they had to kind of just land everything again, just manually onto this safe zone. And so they finally do land, and so we then have Brody who is to immediately call his daughter, like, hey, yeah, like, I'll be home, and like, I'm alright. So that's kind of the quick explanation of most of this movie. I don't think there was much that I didn't go on and didn't state here. There was some banter between both Brody and the co-pilot where they were to kind of talk about like where they went uh, to like had their early careers. We at one point thought the co-pilot was to think that Brody was some like English guy, and he was like, "No, I'm from Scotland," and like all the English guys got all the cool jobs, and I just kind of got left with I kind of what I could. So we also had like Brody apologized for one of uh, the flight attendants getting killed, and we had Brody who was gonna get shot in the shoulder, and we had Bonnie that went on to like kind of hug Brody by the end of this and kind of thanking him for like saving them, and so yeah, so with that said, I think that covers most of the basis of the film, and again, I just thought that this was a decent enough film. Surprisingly, that considering I just kind of didn't go through the whole details and I wanted to get into a much slimmer part of the way in which that I do things. If people don't like this, then there's a number of people that it seems like shorter reviews. So, with that said, I'm gonna go on and just get out of here. Normally, I wouldn't have like this short of a review, but I guess I'm just doing a lot of things just different now. So, with that said, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.